Just as every story needs a villain, so too does it need a hero, or at the very least a kind of anti-hero type that the audience can get behind. And the world of gaming is full of lovable main characters that have won the hearts of millions of people around the globe. Equally, however, there are some downright tosspots that end up fronting video games, and though a title might not be bad on the whole, sometimes we find ourselves rooting for whatever antagonist is on offer because our protagonist is so bloomin' awful. Of course, we're being quite flippant with the title of this video when we say that nobody likes these characters, as naturally they will all have their fans, but it's just that, in our opinion at least, these leading lads and ladies have far too many flaws to win us over. I'm that one guy that everybody loves, right, please? Anyone? Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 video game protagonists that nobody likes. Number 10. Raiden, Metal Gear Solid 2. On reflection, the reason that most people disliked Raiden upon Metal Gear Solid 2's release comes down to one thing: he wasn't Solid Snake. Just 3 years after the release of the OG Metal Gear Solid, fans were treated to a sequel. The vast majority could not wait to see what happened next and were excited to jump right back into Solid Snake's story. They loaded the disc into their PlayStation 2s and got a little bit of time with Snake before he was whisked away and replaced with Raiden. Cue outrage. In terms of his ability to do the job, Raiden is every bit as good as Snake. He could hold his own in a fight and could more or less do everything that Snake could, from stealthing around the joint to taking out his enemies with an elaborate cartwheel. There's no denying that he posed a decent threat. Sadly, he suffered from a serious downgrade in the cool department, and no matter how many baddies he offed, he was just never as kick-ass as Snake. Whereas Snake is a battle-hardened veteran, Raiden is an arrogant brat, and that, coupled with the disappointment of him being the game's protagonist in the first place, meant that he didn't win the favor of many fans. Stunning hairdo, though. Number 9. Ryo Hazuki, Shenmue. Don't get me wrong, if I had to watch my dad getting offed by a mobster and die in my arms, I'd probably be less than likable as well. But even knowing the circumstances behind why Ryo Hazuki is the way he is, that still didn't make us like the young lad anymore. We all react to grief in different ways, but Ryo's all-around stoic nature and indifference to those around him has us wondering if he's even human or just some kind of revenge-seeking android. He's impulsive to the point where it's ridiculous and dives into often incredibly risky situations without giving them a second thought. He's only interested in getting vengeance for his father's death, and he doesn't care about anyone who can't bring him closer to fulfilling his objective. We have to feel especially sorry for Nozomi, a character who cares deeply about Ryo and goes out of her way to remain loyal to him. Despite her devotion, he shows her nothing but disdain. It's fine if you're not interested in a romantic way, but this girl's bending over backwards to see that you come to no harm. The least you can do is act like you're grateful, you miserable sod. Number 8. Squall, Final Fantasy VIII. It's undeniable that Final Fantasy VIII's Squall carries one of the coolest weapons in video gaming, so it's a shame that he's such a weapon himself. Squall is basically the epitome of teen angst, and though he's not had the most wonderful of upbringings, people soon get sick of his general attitude. The main issue that both players and critics found with the brooding hunk was his overall uncaringness. Throughout the vast majority of the game, Squall is sullen, abrasive, and selfish, and though we do learn later on that this is due to his rough childhood, which has made him reluctant to get close to anyone, his behaviour still doesn't make for a particularly sympathetic protagonist. Though his romance with Rinoa does ultimately allow him to become a better person, we do have to wonder what she saw in this floppy-fringed jerk in the first place. The relationship is completely one-sided, and although people do have differing ways of showing affection, consistently giving your admirer the cold shoulder is not really the way to go about it. Final Fantasy VIII is a great game with an excellent cast of thoroughly likable and interesting characters, so it baffles us why the developers decided to focus on the one that time and time again proves himself to be an unfeeling douche nozzle. Number 7. Chris Redfield, Resident Evil series. We'd like to preface this entry by saying that we haven't always disliked Chris Redfield, however he feels like one of those people where the more time we spend in his company, the more we come to loathe him. When we first met him during the Spencer Mansion incident, Redfield was a gutsy warrior whose loyalty to the cause never once faltered. Admittedly, like the rest of Alpha Team, he was hideously unprepared for the horrors that the house had in store, and his dialogue was unintentionally hilarious.
Is that you, Rebecca?
But he was still the epitome of the all-American action hero, and audiences fell in love. When Resident Evil 5 rolled around, however, this all changed. Gone was the hunky elite cop, and in his place was a man who'd clearly been hitting the gym, and possibly the substances, a little too hard. His appearance in the series' fifth main title has become so infamous that the whole boulder-punching nonsense has been memed into oblivion, and sadly, his image has never really recovered. His campaign in Resident Evil 6 is easily the worst, which is saying a lot for a game that isn't all that good to begin with. In Resi 7, he's relegated to little more than a footnote, and his behavior in Village is kind of baffling. Just tell Ethan what the hell's going on, you'd save everyone an awful lot of trouble. Number 6. Bubsy. Bubsy series. If you're unfamiliar with Bubsy the Bobcat, imagine taking Garfield, putting him on a strict diet, and then giving him the personality of Sonic the Hedgehog, only without any of the things that make Sonic endearing, whatever those are. Considering that this is the formula likely used by Bubsy's developers, there's no wonder that the vast majority of players can't stand the stupid orange feline. Though the series' first 2 games received decent reviews from critics, as time has gone on, things have gotten progressively worse, and we can't help but feel that Bubsy himself is partially to blame for his own franchise's demise. Yes, the later games do suffer from a number of technical failings, but having a good protagonist at the helm can sometimes make people forget about a game's shortcomings. Sadly, this series is saddled with Bubsy. Top of the long list of problems with Bubsy is just how downright irritating he is. No matter which of the hugely talented voice actors is portraying the 9-lived maniac, Bubsy's voice is completely grating, and as though that's not enough to drive players up the wall, his so-called jokes and puns are simply painful.
What could possibly go wrong?
God, will he just shut up? Number 5. Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem Forever. 15 years. That's how long the big brains behind the Duke Nukem series had between announcing Duke Nukem Forever and actually releasing it, and yet somehow they managed to produce a game that was completely shambolic. Not only did Duke Nukem Forever carry all of the classic symptoms of a bad game, but its main protagonist was thoroughly unlikable. It was clear that the devs had tried to retain the series' unique brand of humor, but the overly protracted development period meant that a lot of Duke's pop culture references were outdated, and his so-called jokes were just offensive, really. The Hive level painted the titular hero, in very heavy air quotes, as a complete psychopath. As Duke explores an area where a number of women have been captured and forcibly impregnated, he continues to make jokes about the situation, even though these poor souls are facing an incredibly painful death. Unfortunately for any remaining fans of Mr. Nukem, but thankfully for the rest of us, the protagonist's antics in Duke Nukem Forever seem to have been the final nail in the franchise's coffin, as no one's seen or heard from him since. Based on what we saw the last time he was allowed out, it's probably for the best. Number 4. Dante. DMC Devil May Cry. To be 100% clear here, we are only talking about the Dante from 2013's DMC Devil May Cry, and not blonde Dante from the rest of the series. That guy we're cool with. The issue we have with DMC's reimagined Dante is that the character got the Darth Vader treatment, that is to say that the developers took a fan-favourite protagonist and turned him into a whiny teenager. The ashen-haired Dante from the main Devil May Cry series is almost too cool for school, going about his day with a laid-back attitude paired nicely with a whole bunch of perfectly timed quips and insults. DMC Dante, on the other hand, is trying to be too cool for school, skulking about the place with a massive chip on his shoulder and spewing sullen one-liners. His younger self was so broody, and emo in fact, that he tried to slice open his own chest to check if he had a heart, rather than say, oh I don't know, checking for a pulse. Clearly Capcom got the message that fans didn't think much of this Gerard Way wannabe, as Devil May Cry 5 saw the series return to the adventures of the OG Dante. Let's just pray it stays that way. Number 3. Aiden Pierce, Watch Dogs. On the whole, Watch Dogs is, at least in our opinion, a pretty good game. Yes, there was that whole debacle with the graphics, but aside from that, it's a perfectly competent open-world game that has a lot of neat tricks up its sleeve. Sadly, its protagonist is not one of them, as Aiden Pierce has to be one of the blandest characters ever to front a video game. Up until we played Watch Dogs, we were under the impression that hackers were supposed to be all cool and mysterious and at the very least have more personality than your average sock. All we got from Piers was a mopey bloke in a iconic cap, whose sole purpose was seemingly to spit out exposition for the player. Not only is he seriously dull to the point that we were surprised he hasn't invited us over to look at his collection of vintage typewriter keys, which he definitely has, because he's so boring, but he also makes bloody awful life choices. Spying on people and nicking money from people who don't deserve to be robbed are among his more minor infractions, and we were utterly baffled by his decision not to partner up with Damien, who's admittedly a bit of a Wilson himself, but the choice ultimately gets his sister kidnapped. What a wally. Number 2. The whole cast, Until Dawn. Yes, indeed, we couldn't pick just one of the horrible teenagers from Until Dawn because the vast majority of them are awful in their own special ways. We do appreciate that they're meant to be classic slasher stereotypes, but considering that the aim of the game is to try your darndest to keep them all out of harm's way, couldn't the developers have done a bit more to make us like these kids? Naturally, the most detestable of the lot is Emily, a young woman who spends the entire game either being a cow to everyone around her or just whinging about the situation in general. Jessica and Mike come in a close second on account of the fact that they're also kind of horrible towards anyone they meet, only with the added rampant hormones, and everyone else draws our ire for just being terrible people who pull a prank that gets 2 of their friends killed. Just about the only redeemable character among them is Chris, though based on the actions of his mates we can assume he didn't partake in the prank only because he was too drunk to stand. Awful, awful people, every last one of them. Number 1. Cole Phelps, L.A. Noire. If there's anyone in gaming more unnecessarily aggressive than L.A. Noire's Cole Phelps, I have yet to come across them. We first meet Cole whilst he's still in uniform and spend the rest of the game following him as he solves various crimes from vehicular theft to homicide and just about everything in between. One of the main things that makes the protagonist so thoroughly unlikable is his attitude towards others. He seems wholly incapable of handling a situation calmly, and rather than trying to reason with subjects, he often goes straight into yelling at them. We get it, Phelps has trauma from the war, and that would definitely have some bearing on his overall mood and outlook on life, but you can't just go around shouting at witnesses, especially when they're kids. He's also a bit of a preachy git, seeing the world only in black and white and berating his colleagues who have a more shades of grey approach to things. This is especially annoying and somewhat hypocritical at the point that he's just willing to let the Black Dahlia murderer go because his superior said so. Thought you had morals, Cole. Those went away pretty darned quick when a promotion was on the table, didn't they? Silly boy. Come on.